But if the U.S., through the CUSMA review, insists on some form of auto tariffs, we'll ensure that companies that sell vehicles in Canada are strongly incentivized to produce in Canada. Canada's new government remains focused on protecting this unique Canadian advantage. Our objective is to remove all tariffs in the auto sector to build the strongest North American auto sector.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has just issued the clearest warning yet to President Donald Trump. If the United States insists on weaponizing auto tariffs, Canada will not only defend itself, it will rebuild North America's auto future without America. Carney's new auto industry plan is more than a policy announcement. It is a declaration that Canada is done absorbing the economic shocks caused by Washington's unpredictability. And in a twist few in the White House expected, every new tariff Trump threatens seems to accelerate the collapse of the U.S. auto sector while pushing global manufacturers toward Canada.
Again, to be clear, Canada continues to favor a zero tariff regime with the United States in autos because we know that will deliver the strongest North American auto industry. But if the U.S., through the CUSMA review, insists on some form of auto tariffs, we'll ensure that companies that sell vehicles in Canada are strongly incentivized to produce in Canada.
The context is straightforward but explosive. Carney unveiled a 5-pillar strategy designed to fortify Canada's auto sector and reduce vulnerability to U.S. political swings. The plan accelerates electric vehicle and battery manufacturing in Canada, reshapes emission rules to prioritize practical outcomes, expands consumer incentives, and establishes a new trade regime that directly counters future U.S. tariffs. Carney was explicit. Canada prefers a zero-tariff North American auto zone, but Washington's direction has changed. The U.S. government is now openly preparing for tariff escalation under the coming CUSMA review. Canada, in response, is preparing to make any company selling into Canada strongly incentivized, economically compelled to build in Canada instead of importing from the U.S. This shift occurs at the same moment Japan cements its dominance in Canadian production through Toyota and Honda, South Korea deepens investment talks as Hyundai's Georgia project struggles, and China agrees to limited EV access in exchange for potential joint venture opportunities inside Canada. In other words, global industry is moving towards Canada just as Trump is pushing it away from the United States.
Canada's recalibration of EV and emissions rules is intentionally designed to create stability for manufacturers. While the U.S. is locked into a tariff-first approach that raises production costs without solving structural issues, Canada is offering regulatory clarity. Manufacturers prefer predictable frameworks over political volatility. Carney's move signals that Canada is building the operating environment the U.S. has abandoned. The numbers tell the story. Analysts estimate that U.S. auto sales could fall by 1.8 to 2 million vehicles in a single year if Trump maintains his current tariff trajectory. At standard market pricing, that represents roughly $70 to $80 billion in lost sales. On top of that, American consumers will shoulder more than $30 billion in higher costs as tariffs inflate the price of imported parts and finished vehicles. No Canadian policy has inflicted this damage. These consequences come directly from Washington's choices. The U.S. is paying a premium for economic nationalism, while Canada quietly becomes the more rational investment environment. Canada possesses the ingredients the modern auto sector depends on: clean electricity, critical minerals, industrial stability, and transparent policy. EV and battery manufacturers require energy reliability, and Canada's grid provides it. They require mineral supply security, and Canada controls nickel, graphite, cobalt, and copper deposits the U.S. cannot easily replace. Carney's auto plan bundles these strengths into a coherent strategy. Canada welcomes investment, guarantees market clarity, and offers incentives backed by clean power assets. Trump's America offers tariffs, uncertainty, and rising costs. A quiet but profound geopolitical shift is underway. Japanese automakers already account for the majority of vehicles produced in Canada. South Korea is repositioning itself after running into labor and regulatory problems in the U.S.
Hyundai's Georgia delays have forced Seoul to rethink its North American footprint, with Canada emerging as the stable alternative. Meanwhile, China's limited EV access to Canada, paired with tariff reductions between Ottawa and Beijing, signals a new openness that could evolve into battery supply joint ventures. This does not mean Canada is choosing China. It means Canada is choosing diversification, while the U.S. is choosing confrontation. In a globalized auto economy, those choices have consequences. Inside Canada, Trump's tariff threats have triggered a wave of consumer and political unity. Canadians are increasingly rejecting U.S.-made cars, especially after Stellantis and GM relocated production to the U.S. Public sentiment is shifting toward supporting companies that invest directly in Canadian jobs, and Carney's plan makes Canadian-built vehicles more affordable through targeted incentives. This is economic patriotism, created not by rhetoric, but by U.S. pressure. Trump wanted to intimidate Canada. Instead, he strengthened Canadian resolve and reshaped marketplace behavior. If the United States moves ahead with sweeping auto tariffs during the 2026 CUSMA review, the region will enter a fundamentally different economic phase, one where the two largest economies no longer operate within a shared industrial logic. For the United States, this shift would translate into a long-term contraction of its auto sector, driven not only by lost sales, but also by rising costs and fragmented supply chains. The estimates already circulating, tens of billions in lost revenue, millions of vehicles no longer purchased, and a weakened competitive position for Detroit outline the scale of the disruption Washington is choosing to absorb. Canada, meanwhile, would be operating under the opposite set of forces. As U.S. policy pushes global manufacturers away, those same companies gravitate toward a market built on predictability, clean energy, and critical mineral access. Each new investment from Japan, South Korea, or Europe would deepen an industrial realignment that no tariff wall can reverse. A North American split would therefore not be a theoretical scenario. It would be a structural change in which Canada advances by capturing the very opportunities the U.S. has chosen to forfeit. This is the trajectory that forms the bridge into the broader story. The question is no longer whether tariffs hurt Canada. Carney's plan is designed to neutralize that. The real consequence is how profoundly the U.S. weakens its own industrial base, and how steadily Canada positions itself to step into the space that Washington is leaving behind. What Carney has done is not reactionary, it is architectural. He is building a new industrial framework for the next decade, one that assumes U.S. volatility rather than hoping it will fade. Canada is positioning itself as the rational anchor of North American manufacturing. Trump's tariff-heavy strategy exposes the fragility of the U.S. auto system: high dependence on imported parts, insufficient mineral access, grid instability, and political inconsistency. Canada's system, by contrast, is rooted in clean power, diversified trade relationships, and long-term industrial planning. The contrast is becoming unavoidable. One side disrupts, the other builds. North America's auto landscape is being rewritten in real time. Trump's tariffs were meant to pressure Canada into concessions, but they are collapsing the U.S. industry instead. Carney's auto plan is not merely a defensive maneuver, it is an offensive blueprint for industrial leadership. Canada is no longer waiting for the United States to choose stability, it is choosing its own. And if current trends hold, Canada may soon be the uncontested destination for auto manufacturing in North America. The real question now is simple: how long can the U.S. afford the cost of its own policies?
But 2025, year one of Trump term two, that's a massive cliff. The latest data showing a more than 30% drop in traffic.
With everything going on in the U.S., I feel like a lot of Canadians kind of want to stay home.
Won't be going to the U.S.
No.
We're not going to America. We're not spending our money there. It's Canada first, baby.
Every tally and projection I've seen for 2025 is that the U.S. economy will lose billions of dollars in tourist revenue.
Let's be blunt. The United States is starving for Canadian travelers, and the numbers are now so severe, so one-sided, that Washington can't pretend otherwise. While Donald Trump throws insults across the border and talks about Canada like it's a bargaining chip, the only thing truly collapsing is American tourism. And for the first time in a generation, the message is unmistakable. Canada doesn't need the United States. The United States needs Canada. The shift began slowly, almost quietly, but the impact has grown into something impossible to ignore. Canadians simply stopped going to the U.S. Recent travel data shows that cross-border car trips from Canada have fallen more than 30% in 2025, marking 10 straight months of uninterrupted decline. Not since the immediate aftermath of 9/11 has the movement of Canadians into the United States fallen off a cliff this sharply. Air travel tells the same story. Newly released statistics show that Canadian return flights from the United States have dropped in every single month of 2025, with declines approaching 30% at times. Meanwhile, Canadians are traveling to Europe, Asia, and within their own country more than ever. In other words, the desire to explore hasn't vanished. The desire to visit the United States has. Part of it is policy. With Trump back in the White House, the border has become more intimidating than inviting. His administration introduced rules requiring Canadians who stay more than 29 days to be photographed and fingerprinted. Survey data indicates that a significant majority of Canadians now view the border environment as intrusive or unfriendly. Part of it is rhetoric. Trump's public comments calling Canada an abuser, saying it should be America's 51st state, even claiming that Canada wouldn't have a country without the United States, struck a nerve. Canadians heard it, they remembered it, and they acted. And finally, part of it is mood. Many Canadians say they no longer feel welcome, no longer feel safe, and no longer feel any obligation to pour their vacation money into a country that keeps poking them in the eye. "We're not spending our money there," one woman said. "We're done." All of this has pushed American states into panic mode. New York, California, and Florida have launched special advertising campaigns practically begging Canadians to return, some offering hefty discounts, others sounding almost apologetic, and a few distancing themselves from Trump entirely. But the campaigns haven't moved the needle. Canadians aren't coming back. To understand why this moment matters, you have to look at America's dependency. Canadian travelers are not a niche group. They are the single largest source of international visitors to the United States. More Canadians visit the U.S. each year than travelers from Europe, Asia, and South America combined. When Canadians stay home, American restaurants, hotels, sports arenas, retail stores, and theme parks feel it immediately. Economic estimates for 2025 show that America stands to lose nearly $6 billion in tourism revenue because Canadians stopped crossing the border. Businesses in border regions are reporting declining attendance, quieter weekends, canceled event tickets, and a noticeable slowdown that used to be unthinkable during peak Canadian travel seasons. In short, Canada isn't just another tourist market, it's the economic lifeline for dozens of American border communities. The more interesting question is why Canadians are reacting this way now, and the answer is that this isn't about currency or cost or the weather. It's political. Canadians do not respond well to disrespect, especially from a neighbor who claims to be an ally. Trump's comments struck a cultural nerve. The new fingerprinting rules made Canadians feel like suspects, and the tariff war created a sense that the U.S. views Canada not as a partner, but as a target. Polling conducted across Canada shows that the number one reason Canadians are canceling U.S. trips is standing up for Canada, and that is new. Canadians have turned travel into a national statement, and they're doing it with their wallets.
Here's the part Donald Trump never saw coming. Instead of trying to fight this decline, Canada embraced it. Ottawa launched a full campaign encouraging Canadians to explore their own country. National parks introduced free admission days. Federal museums lowered entry costs. Via Rail offered new family incentives. Provinces stepped up with their own promotions, and tourism boards across the country refocused on domestic travelers. The results have been dramatic. Domestic travel inside Canada is booming. Canadian Airbnb bookings within Canada are way up. Summer spending surged in every province. Billions of dollars that used to flow into American border towns now stay inside Canada, supporting local tourism operators, hotels, museums, and regional attractions from Vancouver Island to Prince Edward Island. Trump's hostility pushed Canadians away. Canada turned that push into a national economic win.
For Americans, the situation is not improving anytime soon. Even with major attractions coming next year, including the FIFA World Cup and America's 250th anniversary festivities, industry forecasts indicate that Canadian travel will not return to pre-Trump levels for at least 5 years. That's half a decade of weakened tourism revenue, thinning hotel occupancy, quieter border towns, and permanent changes in travel habits. This is how long-term economic damage starts, not with a crash, but with millions of small decisions that slowly reshape the landscape. Canadians have made their decision. They'll spend their money where they feel respected, welcomed, and valued. In 2025, that place is not the United States. The United States once assumed Canadians would always come, that the flow of tourists, cars, and dollars was a constant of North American life. Now, that assumption has broken. Trump's rhetoric and policies pushed Canadians away. Canada responded by strengthening its own tourism economy. And now America is left staring at empty hotel rooms, struggling festivals, and border towns, wondering what happened. The truth is simple. The U.S. is starving for Canadian travelers, and for the first time in a generation, Canada doesn't feel any urgency to feed them.